I'm Frank Gehry, and this is my masterclass. As a practicing architect, you are constantly confronted with constraints. Gravity is one of them. Budgets are a big one. Who's the client, their expectations, who you're working with. There's a lot of room for creativity outside that, You can meet all those constraints and still make architecture out of it. Years ago, I was sitting at dinner next to Sidney Pollack, and I was full of myself in those days. I was a lot younger, and I was feeling like nobody respected artists and architects and blah, blah, blah. And here was this big movie guy who's made all these great films. And so I was very judgmental, and I was kind of an asshole. And I ventured to say to him, you just do that stuff. There's no art in it, nothing. And Sidney, who was a spectacular human being and great guy, was very patient with me. He turned to me and said, "That's not true, Frank." He said, when I make a Western film for Hollywood, I got constraints. There's a pro forma I have to follow. And he said, there's no question. I can't make it unless there's the hero. He's got to ride to town. He's got to do blah, blah, blah. But he says, within all those constraints, I have 15% of freedom to make my art. And I looked at him, and I went home that night, and I called him the next day, and I said, that's exactly how much the same percentage I have. And so we became fast friends after that. But I think everybody faces it in their work. The constraints are constraints. I mean, they're opportunities to explore things. And some great movies have been made, some great buildings have been made, even some great legislation has been written throughout the constraints and with the constraints. There are times when you work on projects, they're very complicated. The length of time from the day you're hired to a project complete could be at least 6 or 7 years. Things happen in the world during that 6 or 7 years. Sometimes economies go up and down. Things that change which have a serious effect on what you're doing and are things that you're no control over. You're in the middle of, it's like you're in the middle of a sentence and you're just finishing the sentence and the cut. And now what? On the tower in New York, we were at the 40th floor and we were told, cut, that's as high as they're going. 76-story tower, they're going to stop it at 40, so it's going to be a stub. I had a meeting with the client in a restaurant looking across the river at the stub. Client was devastated, I was devastated, everybody. We had a few drinks, devastating drinks. We were caught. She was caught, I was caught, they were caught. I mean, it wasn't anything, no malice or forethought. It was the economy dumped. It was 208, and everybody went sideways. A couple of weeks passed, and a woman that worked for the client, who was senior, she took the risk and made it happen. So as you're working in real life, in real time, you're constantly having small victories and small mistakes, and it just goes on. The important thing is to keep moving ahead and learning from the mistakes and building on it, building positive momentum from that, because it is a very complex endeavor. A lot of it is life and death, security. You go down paths with materials and things that you think are going to work and you find they don't, and you have to recoup and re-understand, regroup, find another option, and you're constantly evaluating, reevaluating directions, mistakes, and opportunities, and bad advice, all kinds of things. Because you got a lot of people involved. You got engineers, mechanical engineers, structural engineers. You have to, it's like a puzzle. You have to put it all together, and it's got to fit at the end perfectly and be a building that everybody likes.